The Canby Report was produced and recorded on the traditional territories of the Coquitlam, Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabeg, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. It's July 21st, 2023, and there are 1,184 days left until the Vancouver municipal elections. This is the Canby Report. I'm Matthew Naylor.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. Happy end of summer. No, middle of summer, whatever it is.
It's like the beginning of summer. It's like 1 month into summer. It's like the late beginning of summer. It is not the end. Nor even the beginning of the end.
I've started listening to American parenting podcasts, and their summer holiday is like June, July, and so they're already like back to school next month, and I'm like, just my brain is broken.
Brutal. Yeah, that would suck.
Yeah.
Like a nice hot August off. But first, before we get to that, patreon.com/Canby Report.
Yes, patreon.com/Canby Report. Go give us $3.
Yes. Give us $3 today at patreon.com/Canby Report. Ken Sim was down at the Khatsalano Street Festival recently and very much put the lie to the idea of Vancouver's alcohol laws when he and another councillor shotgunned a beer, or actually something much more revolting, at this street festival on stage when asked about this flagrant breach of Vancouver's alcohol consumption laws. Councillor Mike Klassen said he does not regret it. However, he does regret that it was a vodka cream soda.
Gross. Sounds gross to drink that if you're not in high school. I mean, technically 19. There's not much to this story. It's just like ridiculous.
It's a whole raft of these today. It's a bunch of like, okay, well, but like this one, I find this particularly annoying because it's like everyone knows, but like if you're going to breach it, why don't we just change the stupid law to let us like, be a little free-ish? I don't know. It's very frustrating. City should take action. You know where the city has tried to take action and been rebuffed and is now probably going to have to sue? That is Surrey, where Brenda Locke has been shot down again. And you've lost. It's over. You really, was Brenda Locke the only person who actually thought that she was running on the Surrey policing issue? Like, she was running on whether or not Doug McCallum was a criminal. And I just don't see why dying on this hill is so important. Nevertheless, she seems very intent on doing so, and we will keep you posted as to what further actions, if any, the Surrey Council and its erstwhile mayor decide to take.
I think the driving force behind Brenda Locke's actions has just been that she owes her election to the National Police Federation. They put so much money into the election there. They didn't fund her campaign directly, but she owes them her soul, I guess. And they are the devil, so here we are.
Yeah, and I suppose it's time to remind Brenda Locke of the old adage, if you can't drink their booze and take their money and vote against them anyway, you don't belong in politics.
I had a lot longer of a conversation on the provincial and federal angles of this with Stuart Prest for this week's Politico, so I encourage listeners to jump over to the other Leg and Boot property and listen to that. But from this angle, I really want the issue to be dead. They quote a number of municipal politicians who aren't on Brenda Locke's team who are like, yes, let's please move on. Let's talk about anything else. Apparently the Board of Trade in Surrey is still for the RCMP. I don't know what the RCMP have on them. Not to imply anything else.
That one is weird, but who knows? I don't know. That one actually seems like it might have something behind it, but who's to say? In other non-stories, basically, council has decided to advance one snail's pace of movement to start building a little bit of the missing middle that Vancouver so sorely needs. Oh, wait, not building, just referring to a public hearing. Oh, wait, and that public hearing is also happening in the fall.
Yeah, this is the ongoing process to allow multiplexes across the city. This would upzone them from being duplexes plus a laneway house to 4 or 6 units per lot by right, which is positive. It's a good step, but God, it's taking forever. And as we saw recently in Victoria, the Tyee had a good piece analyzing how well their missing middle housing initiative has gone in the first 6 months. And Matthew, guess how many applications the city has had to upzone lots in the city of Victoria?
4.
0. Because once you look at the setback requirements, which are larger for the multiplexes than for a single family home, and the parking requirements and the various other things you have to go through, it's easier just to tear a single family home down and build a new one than it is to actually increase the amount of housing in the city. So hopefully Vancouver is paying attention and doesn't shit the bed in the same way.
Well, we can always hope, though, given what Vancouver is doing with temporary modular housing, I wouldn't be super optimistic. Vancouver extended a series of leases to temporary modular housing projects that are going to be expiring in the next 1 to 5 years. Councillor Christine Boyle brought forward a motion asking staff to basically bring forward options to extend those leases, and council said, get bent, basically. This is a Band-Aid solution. Somehow missing the metaphor that, while this is a Band-Aid solution, the obvious implication there is that there is a bleeding wound that needs addressing, and unless they have something like sutures or like gauze and a compress, now we're just going to be bleeding everywhere. And by bleeding everywhere, I mean people aren't going to have homes. So what the fuck are you going to do about this, ABC? This is unacceptable.
Yeah, this is a wildly bad decision. The city had a lot of early wins between, I think it was late Vision Vancouver leadership and Kennedy Stewart leadership, of using city land to put these temporary modular housing up. They opened within 90 days. They got people off the streets or out of shelters and into transition housing effectively. These aren't good for long term because you share bathrooms and kitchens, but it's a roof over your head and some dignity. As they're pointing it out now, as they're closing them, they are finding other housing within BC Housing. So there are still places in theory for all the people who have been housed. But if you have paid attention, there are more people than that who need housing. So shutting these down or allowing them to be shut down over the next 5 years, because this is a very passive voice approach by ABC, doesn't solve anything. It in fact exacerbates the issues we are facing. And so it's wild because this is such an easy win of having housing, having city land, and we could be doing more of this. But instead we are having less because I guess they don't like poor people housing.
Yeah, that is the root of this whole situation there, isn't it? It's that poor people are living in these units, which, I mean, go figure. Once that housing goes away, I would not be super optimistic about it coming back. Not that it's exactly the same entity responsible for this particular problem, but Little Mountain is nearing its 15th anniversary of being torn down and nothing replacing it. I have referred to this before as one of the most egregious acts of class warfare perpetrated by the most recent BC Liberal government. It is abhorrent that it happened. It's absurd that they haven't managed to build anything in the meantime, and it's a giant waste of resources. Why is this still happening? Like, seriously.
No one has an answer.
We've had an NDP government for years now. What the fuck is going on?
The salt in the wound here is that Holborn, the company with the land that's supposed to be building something, has a chain link fence around the site with banners advertising their upcoming project with the bitterest of ironic statements: great stories take time to write. George R. R. Martin's going to finish Game of Thrones before this is done. Is that still a good reference?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. The cultural relevance of that show very much evaporated, but I guess House of the Dragon's on around now, so who knows? Who knows? We're hip. I like this show is going to become us getting progressively less and less cool. Like, not that we were ever particularly high on that score, but like just forever downward.
Middle-aged men complain about housing. Boom. Old men.
Speaking of old men yelling at clouds, a drought is happening in Vancouver, and so we are out of water. Not really. Like, the reservoirs are still okay, but it is a little troubling how little snow fell in our watersheds in the most recent winter. Basically, this has resulted in the park board deciding that they were going to turn off the fountains.
Yeah, they also let all the ponds dry up that would otherwise be filled by the city. You know, just some like basic things to conserve water that would otherwise be used by people to drink. And
I mean, don't drink from the ponds.
Keep their lawns wet. No. Some neighbors are complaining in a CBC article that this is harming their mental health, that this is putting wildlife at risk. These are not natural ponds for the most part, it's worth noting. They were all built in the last 100 years, artificially, and then artificially kept wet. But I find the most ridiculous thing in here is that on a May 29th park board meeting, the commissioners voted, with one exception from Green Tom Digby, to reactivate 6 fountains because of the public outcry of the lack of fountains impacting residents' mental well-being.
I do not get this party. Like, what the fuck is ABC up to? I really dislike this kind of government by, like, complaint and government by reaction stuff that goes on, and they seem particularly bad about it. These were just, like, decorative, non-recirculating city fountains, so it's just water going down, nothing.
Yeah, Digby points out that each of these is going to require 1 million liters of water per year, just literally going down the drain.
Right. Good. Like, at this point, why not keep the fountain full? Like, is it filling? What's happening here? Like, why not just have the fountain, why not have the pond full if we're gonna, like, I don't get it. Like, just don't let it drain for a little bit. And that was the fountain the only source of water for this pond? Is it getting more water? Because if you're going to use the water, then at least keep it around and don't let it go down the drain. What on earth are we doing here?
But it's okay because the CBC article features at the top a picture of a child staring at a dried up pond and looking very sad and forlorn. So they haven't refilled that pond, so I guess that kid is still sad, but at least some old people are happy that they can go stand by a decorative fountain now.
Yeah, in a dry pond bed, apparently. Like, this is like amidst a situation in which, like, Vancouver is handing out a ample amount of fines in response to the drought and in response to people violating the water use restrictions that have been put in place all over the Lower Mainland. I don't know. It just seems like it doesn't make a ton of sense.
No, not at all. Know what else doesn't make sense is the park board who eliminated the Stanley Park bike lane to much applauding from their base and is now upset that there's too much traffic in Stanley Park.
What? Who could have ever seen this? Who could have ever thought this could happen? Oh, this isn't like basic traffic science at all. Like, anyway, what are they doing in response to this eminently predictable thing happening?
They are looking at whether they can reopen the second exit road from the Stanley Park Loop. I actually drove by this the other day because I was leaving the aquarium and trying to get back home, and sometimes it's easier to drive to the aquarium when you have 2 kids and 2 adults, and the only way to get there by transit is the not frequent enough number 19 bus. And so coming out of there, we decided not to go onto the long lineup of traffic trying to go over the Lions Gate to get back to Highway 1 that way. And we looped the whole Stanley Park and saw that the Beach Ave exit is still closed because there's a bike lane in the way on Beach Ave, and we don't want to dump that much traffic right beside a bike lane, sensibly. So I got routed back onto Georgia, and it was fine. But apparently it's not fine for the many people who are purposefully driving to the tea house or whatever in Stanley Park. And so I don't know exactly what plans they have in mind for reopening this second exit that would be around Beach Ave. But the feeling is like they're possibly eyeing the city to tear out the Beach Ave bike lane and allow all the cars back into the West End.
I mean, fuck. Like, yeah, probably. Probably. That's probably what they're doing. And then they can fill in Falls Creek and put the airport there. Whatever stupid shit this government wants to do, it's probably going to do it. Like, Kennedy Stewart was a bad mayor. But I don't think the correct response to that was this. Okay, sorry, one more thing on this is that it is, like, if people are having a problem getting to the tea house, the solution, as you hinted at, would be increasing the frequency of the number 19 bus.
Or some other, tool to get people in and out of that park.
Yes.
The bus is the most obvious one, but
yeah.
Think longer term. Think bigger.
We can both restore and improve the little train. Add some adult-sized cars, for example. They're just park benches strapped to a board. Anyway, in other We Can't Have Nice Things news, Storm Brewing is apparently being told to take down their mural because, of course, it's a violation of city murals policy that prevents unlicensed murals from damaging people's eyeballs with their dangerous art rays.
This is a mural that is kind of iconic in East Van. A lot of people know it and love it. It does include Storm Brewing's product and branding, in that its branding is a rat. And so they are considering it promotion and advertising, according to the staff at Storm Brewing. It's unclear what precipitated the complaint. When they did bring it up on Twitter, a number of ABC councillors said they're going to look into this because, taking down a mural like this kills the vibes. And if there's one thing we need to run a city on, it's pure vibes.
Meisner adding, we don't want to see them lose this valuable piece of art that makes that brewery so interesting and exciting. I mean, that and the fact that they have, like, pizza-flavored beer, which is... it's always a unique time at Storm Brewing. Anyway, he continued, I don't think the removal order is reasonable. I think it's ridiculous. We're going to take steps to make sure that they don't have to, and we'll make the changes necessary to the sign bylaw.
Like, this is a council that came in with the vibe of broken windows theorem, like the idea of we need to clean up crime in this city. We need to get graffiti out of Chinatown. The line between a mural and graffiti is very fuzzy. And so staff taking the direction from the vibes of council that say, hey, enforce our mural policy and get non-murals, quote unquote, taken down or painted over, are doing what I think they were reasonably expected to do. But now they hit someone cool and they're realizing the consequences of their vibes.
Kirby Young, in truly an eloquent statement, said, we need more of this, not less, in this city.
Not wrong.
It's true. We do need more, not less.
Thankfully, Storm Brewing will still be able to criticize the city of Vancouver, as will recipients of city grants, assuming a policy that has been drafted by staff goes through. You'll recall from several months back, we brought a story about council unanimously endorsing a fairly weird motion where Councillor Peter Meisner from ABC had complained that one NGO leader said in an article that they were very disappointed by the election of our mayor. And these kind of comments by grant recipients are quite disrespectful and should be censored by the city. should they receive future grants. And so they directed staff to come up with a policy to ensure there was a respectful dialogue between nonprofits and the city. Staff came back with a report that said, nah, we're not going to do that.
Like, sometimes these stories are about the thin edge of the wedge of fascism, and sometimes they're about the people who run for city council being thin-skinned weirdos. And this one very much is the latter.
Yeah, that initial vote was unanimous, but in the Vancouver Sun-Dan Fumano notes that Christine Boyle and the Green councillors later regretted voting for it after hearing the outrage from many institutions across the city. The staff report coming forward now notes that local government officials must be open to critique of their actions and decision. This is a core tenet of democracy and political life. They have instead recommended a narrow-focused kind of restriction for grant recipients to basically just prohibit things that are otherwise illegal: harassment, discrimination, intimidation, and threats of violence, which don't come up very often from nonprofits because there are professional organizations that would lose funding in many other ways or their legal status if they committed verbal crimes.
Yeah, don't do crimes. Don't do crimes.
That's your lawyerly advice?
Yeah, I am a lawyer. That's my advice. Don't do the crimes. Anyway.
I'm mostly going to be really interested to see if ABC just adopts this. They were kind of hedging in their discussions with Fumano. Meisner didn't really agree to an interview following this story. He didn't provide any additional examples of times that disrespectful commentary had come up. So, we have seen people on council before, notably a mayor, not say anything in advance of a vote and then just do something wild. And hey, maybe they introduce a big amendment and reintroduce their respectful language at the next council meeting. So I'll keep an eye out on that.
That's what I love about government. It's government by surprise. Finally, there have been abusive tweets targeted at Vancouver and Surrey elections candidates. So, I will say, when you are tweeting about people, Twitter is one of those weird things. I mean, quit Twitter. That's my advice. But it's one of those things where, people are not above just staying up and scrolling and reading me tweets about themselves. And that is, easy to internalize. A Samara study looked at 11,000 abusive tweets directed at Vancouver and Surrey candidates. 9,800 of those were to Vancouver politicians. About 2,000 were directed at Kennedy Stewart. It was, just like a torrent of anger being directed at these people. Doug McCallum, hilariously, has done the right thing, in my personal opinion, and doesn't have Twitter. Quit Twitter. Leave it. Go join, I guess, Threads, or better yet, form meaningful human relationships in the real world. Or parasocial ones with your friendly podcast hosts at Leg and Boot Media.
The study is really interesting. It's part of a broader look at commentary against municipal politicians across the country. Within Metrovan, they found that the second most targeted candidate was Colleen Hardwick. And she notes, there is a specific gendered aspect to a lot of this abuse. Kennedy Stewart got a lot of hate, but he didn't get nearly the same kind as Colleen Hardwick and women in politics or people of color. And so the study itself is pretty big. It looks at a lot of different angles of abuse, toxicity, insults, threats, identity attacks, and sexually explicit attacks. Thankfully, they used AI and robots to read all of these tweets because, as you mentioned, reading these rots your brain and isn't good for your mental health. So let's get off Twitter, as you say.
We end every episode of the Canby Report with a Vancouverana, a little tidbit of Vancouver's history that we have dredged up from the archives, picked apart from the ash heap of history lying just outside Maple Ridge in the Fraser Valley. And when we were hunting for little garbage factoids from Vancouver's past, we found one, which we thought was very adorable and worthy of sharing with you. This is, of course, the story of the polar bears and the Stanley Park Zoo.
Yes, big shout out to Scout Magazine, who published this story by Stevie Wilson back in December 2014. The zoo was first opened in Stanley Park in the very early years of the park in 1888. Henry Avison, the city's first park superintendent, captured a baby black bear on the grounds and chained it to a stump. And that's what they called a zoo.
That's how zoos get started. You just see the animals and then you build a cage around them and now they're a zoo.
By 1905, a number of animals had been donated to the project by various residents, including 4 parakeets, a canary, and a seal from then-Mayor Frederick Bascombe. No one knows how the mayor came into possession of a seal. By 1911, a number of animals were killed on the property, including a large buck suspected by a cougar. At least we don't have cougars in the park to worry about anymore.
Yeah, that it would have given our reporting on the coyote situation a very different tenor of a couple of years ago, because cougars kill you and coyotes annoy you. Also, if people were like going and feeding the cougars, maybe they would have deserved it. Who knows? They would have been feeding the cougars with themselves.
The zoo continued to grow. The aquarium itself was opened in 1956, but the zoo got a polar bear grotto built in 1962. There were also penguins at the aquarium. The polar bears, though, were the real highlight. And they continued to be in the aquarium until 1996 when it was closed. The polar bears at that time, I believe, were transferred to facilities. I read this a couple weeks ago. What's most notable is earlier this year, back in May, this polar bear enclosure, which still exists in the zoo, was in the news again as the architect firm Tony Osborne Architecture and Design came forward with a proposal to make a Scandinavian polar bear sauna and spa out of the facility. And they put a bunch of pictures of how they would make this brutalist structure into a modern pool.
I mean, yeah, it's not a bad idea. It's like, if we can reuse a built form, we should. If we can repurpose something that's been abandoned, we should. You know what we should do? Leave it abandoned for 15 fucking years with no purpose. Thanks, Little Mountain. But I think this was some very... It was an attempt to start a conversation, and I think that conversation deserves to be had. Is a luxury spa perhaps the best use of this public land? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it would be to me.
I don't think bringing polar bears back is going to fly in the contemporary era of animal rights, where we can't even have rescued cetaceans in the park.
Don't get me started. Oh well, we miss you, Helen, but at least Dolly Parton came to save us. Yeah, so I guess the theme of today's episode was, we can't have nice things, we can't have a spa, we can't have the polar bears, we can't have a mural, we can't have the RCMP in Surrey, we can't have temporary modular housing, we can't have water,
But we can have a beer at Khatsalano.
Well, at least there's that. For Leg and Boot Media, I'm Matthew Naylor.
I'm Ian Bushfield.
Good day.